New audiobooks on our channel for free every week. Subscribe and click on the bell so you don't miss it.
Napoleon Hill, The Magic Ladder to Success. The text is read by Andrei Krupnik. Introduction. Let's think about what new things a person born during the zenith of Chester Arthur's fame can tell about the secret of success today. Why does Napoleon Hill continue to be a useful advisor to the people of the 21st century? How can someone, being only 25 years older than Henry Ford's Model T, shed light on the process of achieving success in the modern world? Millions of people have taken the essay of a farmer's son, born in the outback of Virginia more than 120 years ago, as the basis of their path to success. It is truly amazing to imagine that a boy who once occupied a modest position in society will have such a lasting influence on us, at least from the moment of acquaintance with him and his ideas. Napoleon Hill was a very prolific writer. In addition to the fact that he created more than a dozen books, he wrote and was the editor of several magazines that were published outside of New York and Chicago. For 40 years he lectured in America, a documentary was made about him, and countless essays were written in newspapers and magazines. Of course, he found his audience and provided them with a lot of material for reflection. He kept writing because the reader needed it. Napoleon Hill's ideas on how to become a successful person are based on long-term, more than 20 years of research and observations. He talked to people who changed the world and, by universal recognition, achieved what they wanted. In the course of his work, he also had the opportunity to meet with many people who had failed in the implementation of their plans. From his experience, a philosophy of success was born, the basis of which is an understanding of human nature. Hill's approach certainly had a novelty. For centuries, people have created belief systems to explain the structure of the world to themselves, but unlike Plato, Descartes, or John Stuart Mill, Napoleon Hill did not start with the question of what is true and objective in the world, in order to then bring reflections on human nature under these judgments. Initially, he raised the question of what led a person to success, and after careful observations outlined a scheme that all people who want to achieve their goal can follow. Napoleon Hill was still not the first to follow this path. Niccolo Machiavelli's famous work The Sovereign, which has a political character, was also based on extreme pragmatism, which was admired and condemned at the same time since the beginning of the 14th century. Unlike Machiavelli, Napoleon Hill wrote about the personal, not the political. His discoveries were encouraging. A successful person, Hill concluded, creates a successful one around him. And, becoming happy and satisfied, multiplies happiness and contentment. This idea contrasts with the trends popular at the beginning of the 20th century. Communism ruled in Europe, and America has not yet forgotten about the legendary speculators who turned things around in order to enrich themselves and destroy their competitors. James E. Fiske, for example, who made and lost his fortune due to capital manipulation and ended his life with a crash. The opinion has taken root that any method is good on the way to success. Charles Darwin's theory of evolution ruthlessly postulates the idea of survival of the fittest, believing that only a small group of people will invariably thrive, while the majority will be trampled and used to achieve the desires of more violent people. In a sense, Napoleon Hill's goal was to reassert the possibility of the American dream. The opportunity to improve yourself and your life through your efforts and a clearly formulated desire. His ideas, of course, are intended for different audiences. A salesman, a schoolteacher, a rabbi, or an engineer can all put Hill's ideas into practice and benefit from it, which we continue to do many decades later. The Ladder to Success is the second book by Napoleon Hill. Published in 1930, it was mainly a very abbreviated version of Hill's bestseller The Law of Success, and for a long time remained in the shadow of its popularity. In essence, The Ladder to Success is an unusual material that the Napoleon Hill Foundation explores to find out how useful and important the philosophy of success is. In the early 1990s, other early books by Napoleon Hill were published in revised editions. The updates affected, first of all, examples from the lives of successful people. So, the success story of John Unamaker and William Wrigley was replaced, respectively, with narratives about Bill Gates and Marika and Ash. Women and national minorities became an integral audience reading Hill's books. Such a turn of events would have made him infinitely happy. All these facts and changes confirm that the philosophy of success remains relevant from the time when it was first written down on paper to this day. Nevertheless, the reader has the opportunity to get acquainted with what is missing in later modern editions: Hill's peculiar vision of the potential for the progress of society and how this vision came to life. Some are very surprised when reading his technological forecasting. The opportunities he saw for new enterprises are still being used. His ideas as a whole are so firmly entrenched in the American consciousness that they are reflected in almost all spheres of human activity, from the works of modern representatives of motivation psychology to the humanities and social sciences. The remaining unchanged content of this small book gives the reader a unique chance to comprehend, which is why the ideas of Napoleon Hill have weight and remain viable. The purpose of this book is not at all to exalt Hill, but to help people who are trying to apply his philosophy in achieving their desires. Readers familiar with the 16 Rules of Success will be convinced again that imagination is an invaluable tool to make your life successful. This edition of this book is intended to awaken the imagination and is the starting point for exploring the part of our life where Hill's ideas are significant and have power. We will provoke you. We want you to think. We want you to start thinking, to draw analogies, to explore your old beliefs. No, you haven't purchased another Napoleon Hill book. You bought a book designed to make all the other books by this author even more valuable. The benefits of the book will increase markedly if you take an active part in the dialogue. The questions and topics offered for discussion are designed to ignite your imagination and renew your desire to succeed. Of course, Napoleon Hill has nothing to say to those people who do not want to listen to him. We, in turn, want you to listen to him, pushing aside all prejudices. This book promises to be unlike all the other works of Napoleon Hill. And even if you have never had the opportunity to hold the works of this author in your hands before, very soon there will be a desire to find more information about this person and his ideas. However, the effectiveness of the experiment will not be whether you read more books by Napoleon Hill. Success depends on whether we begin to apply his ideas, thereby changing our lives. Are you ready to start?
Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so as not to miss the new items.
About the book. The new edition of The Ladder to Success contains a significant part of extracts from the original text, which are accompanied by comments to stimulate the process of reflection of readers and listeners on the ideas of Napoleon Hill. Each chapter begins with a summary of the main ideas intended for discussion. For those who encounter the ideas of Napoleon Hill for the first time, such a summary will become a conceptual framework that will be updated with new information. Those who are already familiar with Hill's ideas may be tempted to skip these brief extracts. However, we warn you against this. Again and again, attention will be focused on important topics, since it is possible to approach the study of the 16 rules without having sufficient awareness. Nothing can be achieved in a hurry. Sometimes in the main text of the book you can hear excerpts from other works by Napoleon Hill. They are included for the purpose of a more detailed presentation of some thoughts, as well as moments not covered in the original Stairs to Success. Napoleon Hill continued to be an active lecturer and writer for more than 30 years, during which this book was reprinted, and all this time he did not stop searching for a new reading of his ideas. The appearance of The Ladder to Success was accompanied by Hill's personal successes and disappointments, which only enriched his ability to notice how people become the smiths of their happiness. It should be borne in mind that this book owes its style to another era. The technique of repetition was considered an excellent method to help people assimilate information well. Italics were very often used, and prose was more flowery in its style. The spelling of some words also differs. In the literary style of those days, there were no pronouns distinguishing the masculine and feminine gender, and the fact that Hill uses the word salesman only with a masculine pronoun does not mean that a woman somehow finds herself on the periphery of his ideas. On the contrary, Napoleon Hill's newsletters often testified to the success of women. You may also find that some of Hill's examples and suggestions run counter to your personal ideas about success. Our goal is to demonstrate how widely applicable the ideas of this author are. If you come across any idea and think, "I would have done the wrong thing," great. If you are satisfied with the progress towards your plans, you cannot attach importance to what you have heard. There are many different ways to success. But don't forget, We are not trying to show you unequivocally how to be successful. Our goal is to stimulate your thinking. It is only necessary to stop thinking, to evaluate what you are facing, and soon you can be convinced of your complete inertia. You should also not take the present comment as an instruction. Only you can know about your progress towards life goals. If you really see positive changes made on your own, do not discard your own plan to try out the ideas listened to in this book, especially if they go against your experience and intuition. Carefully analyze new ideas, and if it turns out that they are not for you, do not waste time on doubts. What is ideal for an influential banker may not be the best choice for a career as a military officer or an aspiring lawyer. Ideally, even ideas that don't suit you can inspire you to analyze your activities and new opportunities. An open look at what your life can become is a chance to make your dreams come true. Lesson 1 is collective intelligence. Summary: Napoleon Hill begins the book The Ladder to Success with a brief definition of the essence of the collective mind. The basic idea of collective intelligence can be defined as follows. It is a mind with a complex structure, consisting of the individual thoughts of two or more people working harmoniously for a specific, jointly set goal. In other words, the collective mind is a special mental resource that arises when a group of people come together to achieve a common goal and carry out their actions without any conflicts. This is a very powerful, but temporary resource. It collapses when there is continuous friction between the partners. In general, collective intelligence is a highly effective tool, and the resulting benefits are worth it. The idea of collective intelligence belongs exclusively to Napoleon Hill and is unique for motivational literature. He saw in the collective mind something more than just the sum of its components. The fact is that this resource, being properly created and functioning correctly, unites the strengths of the participants, excluding their weak qualities. Other authors who appeared a little later offered similar ideas, such as the idea of quality groups, but only a few of these writers could imagine the application of these concepts as widely as Hill did. Collective intelligence can be used in virtually any situation. Hill did not limit its use only within the framework of work. This tool can be created at any time and in any place. The basis for the collective mind is what Napoleon Hill called the chemistry of consciousness. Like the discoveries in physics over the past decades, our understanding of human thinking has also changed significantly. Hill's musings were at the forefront during his writing of The Ladder to Success. He was well aware of the importance of the interaction process in mental activity, but some of his assumptions about the mechanisms of interaction turned out to be erroneous. Nevertheless, Hill points out to us his fundamental ideas for practical application. The section begins with an appeal, perhaps, to the most important concept in the philosophy of success: desire. The original text is the starting point of success. Just as an oak tree slumbers inside an acorn, success originates in the form of intense desire. Motivational forces grow out of strong desires, which encourage people to cherish hopes, make plans, develop self-confidence, and stimulate themselves to take active actions in order to implement a certain plan or goal. So, desire is the starting point of all human achievements. It should always be conscious. Moreover, being one of the powerful stimuli, desire should always ignite human actions. These incentives are known to the author. They are described in the philosophy of the 16 Laws of Success and are partially included in this book. They say, and not without reason, that if you really want something, everything will certainly come true. Everyone who stimulates their consciousness to experience a strong desire achieves their goals. It should be remembered that there are differences between an ordinary desire for a thing and a passionate thirst, which has a great intensity. It is in the latter case that motivating forces arise, thanks to which we make plans and put them into practice. Just desire is, in fact, a passive form of longing. Many people cannot advance beyond the phase of simple desire. Why, you may ask, do such reflections precede the section on collective intelligence? Indeed, in his later works, Hill always started with a lesson about a clearly set goal, which is directly related to the topic of desire. However, here, in The Ladder to Success, Hill seeks to pay attention to the mental state of the participants of the collective mind. And what may initially seem like a digression is harmoniously connected with the subsequent information. Since the concept of collective intelligence occupies an essential place in Hill's philosophy, this topic begins his first two books. In later works, the concept of collective intelligence already occupies a second position, since the problems of desire and purpose are fundamental in the philosophy of success. Here, he solves this issue in a different way, reflecting on the motivation for success in a different context. Let's briefly consider the problems of desire and purpose in this chapter and return to their discussion in the second. The text emphasizes the difference between a simple desire and a strong desire. Simple desires are not able to change anything, while a strong need for something has a transformative power, changing first the personality and then the world. Proof that a strong desire really exists is the action of an individual to implement his plans. Proper mental activity generates physical activity. The emphasis on action is placed at the very beginning and throughout the book. The transition from a simple desire to a strong one becomes a stumbling block for many. They can imagine what they want from life, but they do not have the strength to fan the embers of their desires into a flaming passion. If luck favors them, they do not take any steps to consolidate their position or improve it. If a dark streak of life begins, they swear, but do not try to change the circumstances. People with a passionate desire can be compared to the engine of mental and physical activity. They change the landscape around them, smoothing out irregularities and paving roads to where they need to go. There are people who simply attract success. The personality of such people is characterized by an aphorism that became known thanks to Hill: "You can achieve everything that our consciousness conceives and believes in." Is there something for you that you crave? It must be something more than an indefinite dissatisfaction with the present state of things. It doesn't matter how unattractive life seems to you at the moment. It is also impossible to arouse a passion for something just because other people want it. You will never become famous just because your family fervently believes in it. You need to cling to a spark of ambition, an idea that can ignite your imagination and make you act. Ardent desire, passion, that's what separates people like Steve Case or K. Bailey Hutchinson from dreamers who believe they could be the CEO of a well-known corporation or one of the United States senators. Steven Spielberg becomes famous overnight, and Mia Hamm becomes popular right on the football field. These people know what is really important to them, starting from corporate policy and financing of medical research and ending with film production and achieving their goals. And what do you think? I know what I want. I'm just unlucky. Why am I worse than everyone else? How do their desires turn into passion? There are 8 main motivational forces that, together or separately, are the starting point of all human achievements. These motivational forces are: the first is the need to protect yourself. The second is the desire for sexual relations. The third is the desire to make a financial profit. The fourth is the desire for life after death. The fifth is the desire for fame or power. The sixth is the need for love, a formulation incompatible with the desire for sexual relations. Seventh, the desire for revenge prevails in the undeveloped consciousness. The eighth is the desire to satisfy your egoism. In his subsequent works, Hill changed and expanded this list. He added to it the desire for physical and inner freedom and recognized that fame and egoism are better described as a desire for self-expression, with all its pros and cons. Revenge, Hill believes, is really a manifestation of 2 forces: anger and hatred. He named fear as the main motive, but this will be discussed in detail a little later. A more complete list taken from the book Keys to Success will look something like this: the first is self-preservation, the second is love, the third is fear, the fourth is sexual attraction, the fifth. The sixth desire for life after death is anger. The seventh is hatred, the eighth is the desire for universal recognition and self-expression, the ninth is well-being. Of course, there are other very diverse motives, for example, altruism, physical pleasure, curiosity, or just troubles that you want to get rid of. However, these motives, in the end, can be easily reduced to one fundamental point. The desire to get rid of the source of trouble arises simultaneously from the need for self-expression, anger or irritation, while altruism grows out of and often the idea of life after death. The desire for physical pleasure, as Sigmund Freud would clearly agree, is often a sublimated desire for sexual pleasure. Curiosity can be the result of mixing fear and the need for self-expression. Considering the motives, the number of which is not important, the main point will be the following. People have great power only if they are pushed forward by one or more of the 8 main motives. The forces of imagination in human consciousness are activated when they are stimulated by one of the described motives. We hope you are already asking yourself the question, what is the motive that motivates me? If you dream of success, can you accurately determine it? Is it money or power? Prestige or universal recognition? Triumph over all your enemies or freedom from anything? Answer honestly. It makes no sense to deceive yourself by determining the main motive. It is much more logical to try to understand what you want in order to immediately realize your dream. Steven Spielberg is a wealthy man, but his wealth is just a consequence of the fact that he is following his dream. Kay Bailey Hutchinson has power, but government powers are just a means by which she seeks to change politics, hoping to preserve American freedoms. Hill does not dwell on the differences of motives for a long time, although he understood that in practice some of them turn out to be more weighty than others. However, each of them can make people successful. This idea is very significant. Hill has never admired successful people blindly, even giants like Andrew Carnegie and Henry Ford, who are undoubtedly recognized as ideal models of success. In his magazine, Hill spoke negatively about the fact that Carnegie is engaged in activities directed against the emergence of competition in this area. He also understood that the fact that Ford had become the car king alone would soon damage this company, as it would lead to narrow views and unwillingness to make any changes. But Hill is still more interested in what makes people successful, so he gives an exact indication. If you want to achieve great success, come up with a strong motivation for yourself. People who find it difficult to find the right motive often get stuck between several options. Many people want to have money and fame and at the same time maintain personal security and friendly relations with others. There will be no significant changes in the lives of such people, because they do not want to give up the usual things, for example, from a good, but poorly paid job. The presence of free time, lack of responsibility, the habit of performing the usual duties, all this is a brake on the desire to achieve success. All that people or, perhaps, you really need is an awareness of your deep ambitions. Turning a smoldering desire into a fiery passion requires mental effort. This will be discussed in the next chapter. And what about dark motives, such as revenge, malice, or hatred? Is it possible to start with one of them and hope for well-being, as if we were motivated by love or money? Listeners who have an idea of the 16 rules will understand that these motives are very difficult to reconcile with other ideas of Hill's philosophy. Even the concept of collective intelligence, to which Hill led us in this lesson, has no place next to such a motive as hatred. It is impossible to talk about the impossibility of achieving high results, being motivated by the dark sides of human nature. In the book 16 Laws of Success, Hill presents a table where historical figures are arranged according to adherence to his principles. Abraham Lincoln, Benjamin Franklin, and George Washington received the highest number of points. Hill included 2 other famous people worthy of the highest praise, but since their dreams were eventually debunked, they cannot be considered successful people. We are talking about Napoleon Bonaparte, once the rulers of almost all of Europe, who died in exile on a deserted island in the South Atlantic, and Jesse James robbers on trains. As for President Calvin Coolidge, Hill throws a small stone in his direction and puts him one position below Bonaparte, although he calls him successful. It's easy to think of other people who have won fame, bad or good, to see how in the end their ambitions rebelled against themselves. Sometimes we call it a tragedy, sometimes we say justice has prevailed. It is also true that evil and despicable people do not always bring destruction. For every Adolf Hitler, there is Joseph Stalin, a monster who died with impunity for the evil done to people. Does this mean that you should not worry about the main motivation? It's not like that. To begin with, you need to know exactly what can inspire you, because ignorance will not lead to the desired result. What does money mean to someone who craves love? No matter what you can get out of life, everything will lose its meaning if there is no ardent desire inside you. And what if you are driven by anger or hatred? Will you accept the statement that all means are good on the way to the goal? Later it will become clear that Hill responds negatively to this. Dark motivation has brought many people out of a state of stagnation. Noble motivation has sometimes been the cause of misery and suffering in the world. Therefore, in some cases it is better to have a dark motive, knowing exactly what it will entail, than a noble desire and unclear ideas about the expected result. Starting with a motive you don't like doesn't mean you'll spend the rest of your life implementing it. Dark desire tends to retreat before the advantages of life in accordance with the 16 rules. Starting with the pursuit of a lot of money, it is not necessary that you will end up behind bars, but your ideas about how to dispose of profits will expand, since using a large bank account alone will no longer satisfy you. You will want something more. Real desire, as you can see, is a transformative force. In general, it is better to accept your motivation and all its shortcomings and start acting than to beat around the bush. You may never find a better motivation, reflecting on the fact that nothing changes in life. Hill points out the value and importance of discovering his motive strikingly clearly. Strength and success are, in fact, synonymous. Success cannot be achieved only through honesty, as many believe. Poor houses are inhabited by people who may have been too honest. They didn't manage to save money because they didn't know how to become strong and use their strength. So, what is power and how to get it? Physical strength. There are two types of strength that we will consider in this lesson. Firstly, it is an intellectual power that is acquired during the process of thinking. It is expressed in a certain plan of action and is the result of systematic knowledge. The ability to think, find strategies and perform orderly actions is the starting point of intellectual power. The second type is physical strength. It finds its expression in natural laws. These are electrical energy, gravity, steam pressure, and so on. In this lesson, we will analyze two types of power: intellectual, physical, and explain the relationship between them. Knowledge, as such, does not represent power. Great personal strength is achievable thanks to the harmonious cooperation of several people who concentrate their efforts on developing a specific plan of action. Perhaps you think that Hill will start thinking in detail about the intellectual power of man, since this is the main topic of conversation. Each of us has unique intellectual abilities, which, accordingly, is the basis for achieving potential success. However, first of all, Hill turns to the analysis of physical strength. Why? Because he is trying to correct our ideas about intellectual power with the help of his ideas. He wants us to see the scientific validity of these ideas. Hill begins his reasoning by describing the structure of the atom, admiring the fact that it consists of particles behaving according to strictly defined rules. In a world where everything is physically grounded, it doesn't matter if you study a big star that moves across the sky, or consider a small grain of sand. The object under study is an ordered structure of molecules, atoms and electrons rotating at an incredible speed. Every particle of the physical body is constantly moving. Although to the naked eye it seems that all physical bodies are motionless. We rarely realize the process of constant motion, but this is the basis of all chemical and most physical phenomena, since the energies of atoms and molecules attract and repel each other, combine to form new substances, or participate in reactions such as the oxidation process, for example. Another consequence of motion is oscillation. It is known that a person can detect vibrations using the 5 senses of perception. Moreover, the perception of sound, heat and light usually has an increased intensity. But if you go up an order of magnitude higher, perhaps they don't suspect about it yet. Fluctuations create the power of human thought. We have come to the main idea. If sound, heat and light are sent by their sources to the external environment, why can't the same thing happen to thoughts? Just as it was proved many years ago that light is a form of energy, today's science has proven that brilliant ideas are also a form of energy. Alpha radiation, which is produced in a state of mental relaxation, has a power of 8 to 13 Hz, much less than Napoleon Hill believed. In the state of excitation, beta radiation with a strength of 13 to 30 Hz occurs. Does it matter that Hill made a mistake with cleanliness? No. The important thing is that energy is generated by the activity of our brain. Then Napoleon Hill turns to one of the most influential scientists of the last century. Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone, a device that transmits sound by converting vibrations of sound waves into electric current, and then performs the current reconversion into sound waves, but in a different place. He himself was greatly fascinated by the idea of transferring energy from one place to another while preserving all its basic characteristics. Advances in what he called wireless transmission in radio and television only stimulated Bell's thinking. It's hard to imagine how excited he would be if he saw the advent of the internet, mobile phones and an oscilloscope. The inventor notes, "We can think a lot based on the facts known to us about wireless waves, which, as I have already said, are the only ones known to us among a huge variety of varieties of vibrations. If the radiation of thought is similar to wireless radiation, then, originating in the human brain, it will travel endlessly around the world and the universe. The human body and skull, as well as other obstacles, will not prevent the passage of these waves, since their path lies through the ether, which surrounds the molecules of any substance, regardless of its hardness and density." Are you asking if in this case there will be a constant interaction and confusion of human thoughts? But can you say for sure that other people's thoughts are not interacting with yours at the moment? I have observed a lot of cases of inner anxiety, which I could not explain. For example, when addressing the audience, the lecturer always feels inspired or disappointed. I have experienced this many times in my life, but I have never been able to give a clear physical explanation for it. In short, the hypothesis that the thoughts of one person can communicate with the thoughts of another individual is based on the theory that thought or life force is a form of electrical changes that participates in electromagnetic induction and is transmitted in space. Inflexible science fiction writers, notorious scammers and representatives of the entertainment industry who make a living fraudulently have made the idea of communicating thoughts extremely unconvincing. Neither Napoleon Hill nor Alexander Bell could imagine bending spoons, walking on hot coals, card fraud as confirmation of ideas of internal connections between people. Of course, all of the above would be surprising for no reason, since these examples of telepathy copy the plots of movies. He sought to emphasize that our internal energy is also active outside the brain. First, by encouraging us to take action, it changes the world around us. This influence is undeniable. He also draws attention to the mental potential capable of sending and receiving energy. Energy is not directed at bending the spoon, but at other consciousnesses that have similar energy. Napoleon Hill calls this process the chemistry of consciousness. This term may seem somewhat erroneous, since the laws of physics play a more important role than the chemistry of contact between consciousnesses. However, it is also true that brain activity is largely the result of chemical interactions between cells. Endorphins, for example, are chemicals that are produced by certain brain cells and create a feeling of pleasure. It turns out that the memory mechanism also works due to chemical reactions occurring in brain cells. Even the electrical waves that the brain produces are the result of chemical processes. That is why the chemistry of consciousness is worthy of further study. Chemistry consciousness. Napoleon Hill returns to the discussion of the influences that people in contact with each other have on each other. The minds of some people are so adapted to each other that love at first sight becomes the inevitable result of contact between them. Who of us does not have such experience? In other cases, people's minds are so antagonistic that a strong mutual rejection is felt at the first meeting. Such situations are not explained in any way, because the usual reasons for liking or disliking do not work here. The consequences of the interactions of two consciousnesses are obvious to anyone. Each consequence must have its own cause. What could be more reasonable than an assumption? The reason for the change in attitude towards a person at the level of consciousness is nothing more than a violation of the state of electrons or other elements that occurs in both consciousnesses in the process of adapting to a new field created by contact. In other words, the inner state of one person affects the inner state of the people next to him. A consciousness tormented by fear will begin to inspire fear in others. Greedy consciousness, happy, peaceful consciousness. By contacting, we all influence others. Of course, consciousness carrying a different type of energy will feel it and adapt. The essence of such adaptation is a source of emotional reaction to new people. Some will seem close in spirit to us, while others will be so different from us that they will cause fears and fear, thanks to their energy and chemistry of consciousness. Napoleon Hill gives a great many examples of short-term and long-term effects of the chemistry of consciousness between people. Marriages and romantic relationships, he notes, can be predicted based on the initial reaction of people to each other. The whole civilized world knows that the first 2 or 3 years of marriage are marked by a large number of disagreements of a more or less minor nature. These are years of rubbing against each other. Although there are other factors. The lack of harmony in early marriage is explained by the slowness of the chemistry of the two consciousnesses. Being in different states, electrons and energy particles, called consciousness, at the first contact are often neither too friendly nor antagonistic to each other. But over time, through long-term close relationships, harmony can be achieved, excluding those rare cases when living together leads to outright hostility between people. These are the consequences of chemical reactions occurring in human minds. Therefore, any experienced speaker can easily understand how his statements are perceived by the public. The hostility of at least one listener from a thousandth audience can be calculated by a lecturer who has learned to feel and fix the influence of antagonism. Moreover, the speaker can make such conclusions without even looking at the expressions on the faces of those present. In view of all that has been said, the audience can cause the speaker to rise to the heights of his skill or, conversely, lead to failure with his silence and indifferent views. All merchants, experts in their field, know when the psychological moment of retreat comes. But not because of what the prospective buyer says, but because of the chemistry of the buyer's consciousness that the seller feels. Words often distort the intentions of the speakers, but the correct interpretation of the chemistry of consciousness does not give a chance for error. Every experienced trader knows that most buyers have a habit of creating a tense situation when the purchase is almost completed. Every consciousness has a so-called electromagnetic field. The nature of this field is different and depends on the mood of the individual, as well as on the chemical characteristics of the consciousness that creates this field. The author believes that in the normal state, the chemistry of an individual's consciousness depends on his heredity, as well as on the thoughts that dominate consciousness at the moment. The author is convinced that each individual consciousness is in the process of constant change, that the philosophy of the individual and the general way of thinking change the chemical characteristics of his consciousness. Everyone knows that a person can change his consciousness at will so that it will attract or repel people with whom he contacts. In other words, each person appropriates an inner mood with which he is able to attract and please others, or to repel and antagonize them. Moreover, everything happens without words, facial expressions, and other forms of expression of one's mood and manner of behavior. If you are already familiar with Hill's works, you are probably already nodding your head approvingly. The idea of a positive inner position is the cornerstone of most of his later writings, as well as an invaluable tool to which he often resorts. A positive internal position gives great advantages. Everyone who has worked on the development of a positive inner state knows that it becomes a catalyst for changes occurring in other people. Unfortunately, this process proceeds identically if you are in a bad mood. Often the negativity directed at oneself splashes out on others. This is an example of the simple chemistry of our consciousness. Such internal interactions occur continuously, whether we notice them or not. Depending on our own attitude, interactions are beneficial or harmful. Therefore, it is better to tune into a positive internal position. Starting all relationships from the most intimate moments to everyday affairs in a positive way. The chemistry of consciousness and economic power. Imagine that there is a way to create harmonious relationships that have a specific goal in front of them. Such a relationship can be easily achieved with the help of collective intelligence. Collective intelligence arises when two or more consciousnesses come together in absolute harmony. In this harmonious union, chemical reactions generate a third consciousness, which can be appropriated and used by either one or several individual consciousnesses. The collective mind functions as long as friendly and peaceful relations prevail between the members of the group. Its integrity disintegrates, and it disappears without a trace as soon as the union splits. Harmony of relations between the participants of the collective mind is achieved in several ways. Every sales manager, military officer, and other professional in any activity understands the importance of team spirit. The feeling of full understanding and coordinated joint actions in achieving success. The universal sense of harmony as a goal is achieved through discipline, conscious or forced, through which the chemistry of individual consciousnesses is changed in such a way that they merge together and function as one. The ways of merging consciousnesses depend on which method of leadership is peculiar to the leaders of the union. Each boss has his own method of coordinating the minds of his subordinates. Some use the method of punishment, while others choose the path of encouragement to bring people together in a group that has unity. It is not necessary to make a long digression into the history of government, politics, commercial activity and financial affairs in order to cover all the techniques used by various leaders in the process of connecting individual consciousnesses into collective consciousness. In other words, all managers create a collective consciousness, fully aware of the main motives driving people. This has already been considered by Napoleon Hill. The expression collective consciousness should not lead you to think that it takes a large number of people to create a collective mind. Remember, 2 consciousnesses are enough to get the result of the functioning of the collective mind. Hill believes that the optimal number of participants should be 6 to 7 people. But a smaller or larger number should not hinder your endeavor. It only takes 2 people to create a collective mind. Nevertheless, what benefits does collective intelligence promise us? In more detail, when several people bring their consciousnesses into agreement and a collective consciousness appears, each member of the group gets the opportunity to contact and adopt knowledge and experience from others on a subconscious level. It immediately becomes noticeable. Consciousness resonates with each other, as a result of which a brighter imagination and what we call the sixth sense develop. It is thanks to the sixth sense that new ideas are communicated to our consciousness. They take the form and shape of the dominant thoughts in our consciousness. If the whole group has set a goal to discuss a certain problem, ideas on this matter arise from everyone, as if obeying some external force. The consciousness of the participants of the collective mind becomes magnets that attract well-thought-out ideas and thoughts. The process of merging consciousnesses together, called collective intelligence, can be compared to the process of connecting several batteries into a single transmission line. Thus, the voltage on the line increases due to the energy charge of each new battery. The same thing happens when the consciousnesses unite into a collective mind. A single consciousness stimulates the consciousness of the other members of the group until its energy becomes so large that it penetrates and connects with the universal energy. This is an amazing judgment, and it will undoubtedly become extremely important for anyone who hopes to achieve something in life. In other words, Napoleon Hill's idea states that consciousness focused on a specific goal can make the work of each consciousness more intense. The advantage is boundless inspiration, growing creativity, solved problems, huge enthusiasm, and productive work. Why are so few people using these benefits? Conflicting ambitions and aspirations usually interfere with the functioning of the collective mind. Imagine 2 young people who worked together in a garage and were able to concentrate their knowledge and foresight in a collective mind. As a result, they became the creators of Apple Computers, a company that revolutionized personal computers and questioned the achievements of IBM. Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak did not have the proper funding and expertise of engineers available to all large corporations. Success came to them thanks to the concentration of all internal resources on a single goal. As a result, Apple has turned into a big company. But, like IBM and other giant corporations, a significant miscalculation was made. Instead of directing the energy of 2 employees to perform a single task, the company has set itself many goals, for example, meeting the requirements of corporate clients, attracting new users working at home, developing new operating systems. At the same time, much attention was paid to the company's shareholders. The collective mind ceased to exist, and the APPL lost its former positions. Large organizations have their advantages, but it is extremely rare for an executive director to unite everyone with a single goal and create a collective mind that would encompass all employees. In almost any team, there is competition and a desire to receive more money, and tricks for personal promotion prevail over the general interests of the company. Sellers want prices to be lower. Shareholders are interested in achieving practical results. The advertising department offers new original promotion schemes, and the legal department really takes care of issues of duties and responsibilities. Compare everything with a small team. Each employee knows their responsibilities in the process of working together. Everyone clearly represents the costs and benefits of certain actions. They often use brainstorming techniques to solve problems. They share their thoughts with each other. If someone succeeds, it becomes common for everyone. Such a close relationship between employees is the result of collective intelligence. This is his strength. Talking about the collective mind, Napoleon Hill cites 3 important public figures of his time as an example. Maybe they called the collective mind in a different way, but it was this phenomenon that they managed to create. They were Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, and Harvey Firestone, the founder of the tire manufacturing company that bears his name. They were friends and spent many years of free time together. Napoleon Hill notes an amazing thing. All 3, being from simple families with low incomes and not having a good special education, have reached great heights in their lives. Their union, Hill reflects, allowed them to exchange thoughts, to be aware of new information, to see the possibilities of applying their ideas, which were in abundance. In light of what has been said, it is strange to recall the aggravation of relations between Ford Motor Company and Firestone Tires, which occurred many years later. The dispute about responsibility regarding tires for Ford Explorer would have taken a completely different turn if Henry Ford and Harvey Firestone had been able to meet and discuss all the issues. For both companies, it would be more beneficial than it would spoil the reputation. And the situation would be corrected. Napoleon Hill saw a similar situation between a group of businessmen from Chicago, known as the Big Six, and the directors of the so-called Steel of the United States at that time. Today, many successful examples of such intellectual unions are known all over the world. Steven Spielberg works together with Jeffrey Katzenberg and David Geffen, and if Spielberg's name is heard more, it does not mean that the remaining 2 do not contribute to the success of their company. DreamWorks is a big company, and even if the collective mind does not cover all its employees, it makes sense to assume that part of the success is ensured by the fruitful joint work of the directors. Napoleon Hill claims, "Search wherever you want, but wherever you find an outstanding example of success in business or in finance or in the field of industrial production, you can be sure that the key to success is in the person who applied the principle of chemistry of consciousness, thanks to which the collective mind was created." At first glance, it seems that all the work in achieving success has been done by a single person. But take a closer look, and you will find that the minds of many people were coordinated with the consciousness of the leader. Human powers are organized knowledge expressed through intellectual activity. It is impossible to make any achievements if the individuals involved in the case are not able to combine their knowledge and energy into a harmonious whole. The lack of well-coordinated coordination inevitably leads to the collapse of any endeavors. Next, Napoleon Hill touches on the story that happened in the classroom where he taught. He asked the students to write an essay that suggested describing the welfare of Henry Ford. Most wrote about money savings and stocks, factories, gave a detailed inventory of Ford's property, and only one expressed such a point of view. Henry Ford's wealth consists primarily of 2 things: operating capital, raw materials, and finished products. Knowledge gained through the experience of Henry Ford himself, as well as coordinated actions of the entire organization, which understands how best to apply this knowledge. It is absolutely impossible to calculate at least approximately the value of these 2 groups of wealth in monetary terms, but it seems to me that their relative value is as follows: 75% is the general experience and knowledge of the Ford Corporation, 25% is cash and other material goods, including raw materials and finished products. Napoleon Hill fully agrees with this idea and notes, "Undoubtedly, Henry Ford's greatest asset is his intellect. Next in importance are the abilities of his companions, since it was thanks to their activities that the material goods belonging to Ford appeared. Even if you destroy all the factories owned by Ford Motor Company, eliminating every mechanism, all materials and finished products, every car, every dollar in the bank account, Ford, despite this, will still remain the most powerful man on earth in economic terms. The intelligence that created Ford's business will be able to do it again in a shorter time. The accumulation of an unlimited amount of capital is easily accessible to a person with such mental abilities as Henry Ford. In terms of economics, Ford is the most influential person on earth. Because no one else has such an amazing, proven concept of organized knowledge." However, Napoleon Hill points out some of Ford's miscalculations, although he cannot clearly articulate what they are. Perhaps the premise of the problems is seen in Ford's famous statement, "No matter what color the buyers want the car, it will still be black." It is worth noting that 2 decades after the publication of the ladder to Ford's success, General Motors was ahead of the company. The quality that often explains the rise of General Motors at a loss to Ford is the company's initial desire to look for new ideas from talented design teams, while Ford's cars were no longer surprising with their innovation. And although Henry Ford was called the automotive titan much earlier, it seems that the collective mind began to work for General Motors. Today it is very difficult to single out the most economically influential person in the world. But if Steve Case or Bill Gates suddenly found themselves unemployed, there is no doubt that these people, having already proved their ability to build a successful business, would have started all over again without any problems and began to succeed. Of course, there is a happy streak in everyone's life. But it doesn't last forever. You need to build your own happiness yourself. Napoleon Hill calls the ability to create something, regardless of what resources you initially have, planned knowledge. Planned knowledge becomes power. And how do we know? Strength and success are synonymous. One grows out of the other. Therefore, a person who has the knowledge and potential to develop his strength according to the principle of harmonious union of individual consciousnesses or in any other way can achieve success in any serious enterprise. One thing is obvious: the more knowledge you are able to accumulate and use, the better for you. Planned knowledge is more valuable than capital and prestige, because it can easily be transformed into any other benefits. Through collective intelligence, we increase both knowledge and our ability to apply it effectively. So, what makes the collective mind work? The Psychology of Harmony. Napoleon Hill begins his next paragraph with a warning. It should not be assumed that the collective mind will instantly appear in a group claiming to work harmoniously in the spirit of harmony. Harmony in the true sense of the word is as rare among people as genuine Christianity is among those who call themselves Christians. Harmony is the core around which the phenomenon of collective intelligence should develop. There is no collective intelligence without this element. A truth that should not be repeated too often. Woodrow Wilson, proposing the creation of the League of Nations, saw the expansion of the collective mind, which included the consciousness of representatives of all civilized countries of the world. Wilson's idea is one of the most far-sighted humanitarian concepts ever created by man, because it touches on the theme of establishing the brotherhood of people on Earth. The League of Nations and similar associations based on international peace and accord are certainly becoming a reality. Napoleon Hill wasn't the only one mourning the League of Nations. He also foresaw the appearance of its consequences, the United Nations. Being a patriot in the known world, he smoothed over the fact that the main factor in the collapse of the League of Nations was the lack of participation of the United States in it, although our president proposed such a way. The League ceased to exist because its purpose was to coordinate the actions of all the major countries of the world. By not including the United States in its membership, the League lost the harmony necessary to fulfill the mission. It was the experience of a failed collective mind. Note: the United Nations is also not always an example of a functioning collective mind, although in times of crisis it manages to achieve cohesion. There are often various kinds of problems. But let's remember that it was the UN that attempted to rid the world of smallpox, a dangerous disease that has been a disaster throughout history. Such is the power of the collective mind. Harmony, of course, is difficult to keep. Napoleon Hill gives an example of the Old Believers' religious meetings of the revivalist sect, although even in 1930 he saw that their views were outdated. The internal energy of such a gathering is striking in its power, which, nevertheless, instantly escapes. The same can be said about the trade turnover seminar, when participants get together, use brainstorming techniques, create useful connections, enjoying the spirit of cohesion. You can call it all in different ways: psychology, chemistry of consciousness, as you please. After all, it is based on one principle. Only one thing is important: if there is complete harmony between the members of the group, each consciousness is instantly replenished with power and energy, called the collective mind. It is not surprising that the leader of commercial activities, industrial enterprises, as well as other areas, it is quite difficult to organize a group of people who could work and achieve results without friction. Each person has internal forces that are difficult to harmonize, even if the environment is conducive to peace and harmony. If it is difficult to establish harmony in a person's consciousness, then imagine the difficulties we will face in order to create harmony in a whole group of such consciousnesses, forcing them to function as a whole thanks to the phenomenon of collective intelligence. A leader who successfully develops and directs the energy of the collective mind must have tact, patience, perseverance, self-confidence, deep knowledge in the field of chemistry of consciousness, as well as the ability to adapt, while being in a state of equilibrium harmony to rapidly changing circumstances, without showing his irritation. One of the greatest merits of the principles of success is the way in which the forces of our consciousness are harmonized. Aimed at fulfilling a clearly set goal, your consciousness begins to avoid anything that distracts attention. Classes to develop self-confidence, your imagination, enthusiasm, self-control, successful personalities of correct thinking and concentration will help you to harmonize your inner forces, and you will be able to activate it in other people. A successful leader, like a chameleon, must have the ability to change the color of his consciousness in order to feel confident in any situations concerning his business. Moreover, he should be able to change his mood without losing self-control and without showing his irritation. The meaning of creating harmony is to establish balance. This requires a huge effort, especially for a young collective mind. It should be said that even small progress soon begins to grow rapidly, because people like the state of harmony, especially if it benefits. Set the right direction for the first achievement, and all participants of the collective mind will begin to actively help from their side. It cannot be said that this can solve all problems. But if any ship captain attacks his crew, you will find that a more detailed knowledge of the participants of the collective mind will allow you to lead them better. The whole world needs leaders who can create harmony. Only the most hopeless and pathetic people are afraid of her. Creating harmony is a real art, and there is no need to despair if something does not work out at the beginning. Perseverance and faith in your goal will be the best helpers. In each subsequent lesson you will be able to find new ideas on how to create harmony. The first lesson was quite long. Napoleon Hill introduced us to his two main topics. He reflected on the power of human consciousness and the need for harmony, and now he can move on at a faster pace. After listening to what Hill wrote and taking into account the additional comments, remember two main ideas. The power of your consciousness and the power of harmony are extremely important for creating something worthwhile. As you progress through the lessons, you will understand how they can be directed to achieve your goals. All you have to do is take a step forward and apply our ideas to your life situation. The principles of success are not a formula. It's also not 16 simple steps to fame and fortune. Before giving a result, they will require your active actions and understanding. These are the principles of Napoleon Hill's success. It's time to make them your own.
Dear listeners, write down what other books you would like to listen to in audio format. Thank you for your likes and comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We wish you all the best.